Good evening and welcome to Prime Time Lawmakers, GPB's nightly coverage of the Georgia General Assembly. It's the first day of the 2012 session. I'm Scott Slade. And coming up in tonight's program, final passage of a bill in the Senate that will prohibit local school boards from laying off teachers based on seniority alone. A sneak peek at Governor Nathan Deal's legislative agenda. The governor says changes are coming to Georgia's pre-K program. And we begin our leadership interview series tonight. House Speaker David Ralston says criminal justice reform will be a big priority this year. And we welcome Tom Crawford of the Georgia Report for some analysis of this first day of the session. A first day that actually saw some activity. All that's coming up at Prime Time Lawmakers. But first, we check in with one of our great Capitol reporters, Kiosha Howard, with more on that local school board story. She's standing by live at the Capitol. Kiosha?
Thanks, Scott. The Senate wasted no time getting right to business this morning, taking up carryover legislation from last session. In the first hours of the session, they granted final passage to Senate Bill 184, which prohibits school boards from solely considering seniority when laying off teachers. Opponents of the measure say it's not only limiting local control, but it's just a cover-up for pay-for-performance legislation.
This language, does it not? Certainly. It says shall not adopt or implement a policy. That is a direct mandate by the state government.
Over half of our budget goes to these schools, so it's not unusual for us to develop policies since the state is funding most of education.
It's pay for performance. That's what this is. And they're passing it on the first day when we don't usually take on an intricate issue. I don't think anybody's had time to tell them how they feel about it this year, whether it be GAE or the Federation of Teachers or the Professional Georgia Educators. If we pass this without blinking and don't send it back to committee where these folks can tell you how they feel, I think we're doing something inappropriate. I think we're doing something that's out of order.
Senator Thompson's motion to table the bill failed, and the debate continued.
If this body on the first day, the last day, or any day in between can't look at this policy and realize how ridiculous it is, I don't know what we're going to do to fix education. Last in, first out takes nothing into consideration but how long you've been there.
It's troubling to give fiery speeches on behalf of public education and yet have participated in cutting more than $4 billion out of K through 12, increased class size, reduced the number of days in the school year, and furloughed teachers all over this state.
After more than an hour of debate, SB 184 passed by a vote of 38 to 15. Because the Senate made no changes to the version the House passed last year, the bill now goes to the governor. The Senate also gave final passage to another bill that affects Georgia's education system. Senate Bill 38 will give the state school superintendent direct hiring and firing power. Some legislators feel the bill takes power from local school boards, though. Senate Majority Leader Chip Rogers explains the bill.
This would allow him to hire his staff and also dismiss his staff, but that he could be overridden by the state school board with a 2/3 supermajority vote. This would also bring him back in line along with all other department heads with the amount of authority he can enter into a contract for.
At this time, who has the authority to approve contracts?
You mean at an amount above the current $50,000? That would be the State Board of Education.
Okay, and so why would we give him this power?
Well, they could always override his decisions, but this puts him in line with every other department head in the state.
And with that issue cleared up, the bill passed unanimously and now goes to the governor's desk. Reporting live from the Capitol, I'm Kiosha Howard for Primetime Lawmakers.
All right, thank you very much, Kiosha. Thanks for that report. This will certainly be a week of setting priorities for the legislative session, and we sort of can tell where Georgians want everything to go. In a poll released this weekend by Mason-Dixon Polling Research, Georgians sounded off on a number of issues, what they think should be at the top of the agenda for Governor Deal and the legislature. Let's take a look at this telephone poll of nearly 625 likely registered voters from December 12th through 14th. 39% of respondents said jobs or the economy should be the top priority, while 14% said health care. 12% taxes and spending, 10% said education should be the top priority. No other response garnered double-digit percentages. But other issues cited by Georgians included immigration, crime, moral issues, and transportation. In addition to legislative priorities, the poll also asked about changes recommended by the Special Counsel on Tax Reform and Fairness to reduce the state income tax. Here's what respondents said. They were asked if they would support or oppose placing a sales tax on groceries in exchange for a cut in the state income tax. 71% were opposed to that sales tax on groceries, 19% supported it, and 10% were undecided. Those same respondents were also asked if they would support or oppose increasing the tax on a pack of cigarettes up to $1 to help pay for a cut of the state income tax. 60% support increasing cigarette taxes, while 35% oppose. 5% were undecided. Some other interesting numbers that came out of the poll results: 64% of respondents support shortening prison sentences for nonviolent offenders. 53% of respondents believe the state should support daily operations of mass transit. 50% agree that the state should soften its new immigration law in response to concerns raised by the agriculture industry. 51% support legalizing gambling and horse racing to support educational programs like the Hope Scholarship and Trauma Care. But 46% of respondents would support the legalization of casino gambling for those same purposes. Turning now to more news from the state capitol, we welcome in our Capitol correspondent, Sandra Parrish.
Thanks, Scott. You'd hardly know it was the first day of the session here. Such a flurry of activity today, as many state lawmakers were picking up right where they left off a year ago.
It is my honor to declare that the 2012 session of the Georgia General Assembly is now called to order, and we are in session.
It was a busy day here at the Gold Dome, from an anti-death penalty rally outside to a recovery awareness day inside. In the second of this two-year term, state lawmakers have a host of issues they'll debate this session.
We need better jobs and we need a stronger economy, and that is a local issue. That's a state issue. Georgia has lagged behind every other southern state. We have one of the highest unemployment rates, and we've been behind the national average for almost 50 consecutive months. That's a local issue, and I think that Governor Deal understands that we have to address it. The question is how. That means that we have to have a tripartite approach. We have to encourage economic security, so that's creating good jobs, but also encouraging a stronger economy by helping businesses and promoting rural recovery.
Criminal justice reform is expected to be a big priority this year. Representative Jay Neal sponsored a bill last year to create a special counsel that looked at relieving overcrowding in state prisons by coming up with alternative sentences for nonviolent offenders.
Georgians want this. They have to understand what we're doing, and we're ultimately given an opportunity to improve public safety, reduce recidivism, and allow these individuals that right now are a tax burden to become productive taxpayers in Georgia. That's our primary goal.
Two South Georgia lawmakers also took to the well today to implore the Board of Regents to hold off on a vote tomorrow to consolidate 8 colleges around Georgia.
Last Wednesday, a meeting was held at Waycross College in Waycross by the Chancellor of the University System of Georgia and the Chair of the Board of Regents to reveal to Waycross College personnel and our local elected officials the intention of the Chancellor and Board of Regents to merge or consolidate Waycross College into South Georgia College, which is located over an hour's drive away in Douglas, Georgia. We have in Waycross been, to say the least, flabbergasted by the decision by the university system to take these steps, particularly in light of the fact that this was rolled out in this meeting last Wednesday, and the Board of Regents intends to vote on this matter tomorrow, on Tuesday, less than a week's notice. People in Waycross are upset about this. People in Waycross are mobilizing about this.
Also this afternoon, the joint House and Senate Economic Development and Tourism Committee met with Georgia lottery officials to get an overview of where the lottery stands. Lottery President Margaret DeFrancisco announced the lottery has given its 13th billionth dollar for education. When Lottery Board Chairman Jimmy Braswell was asked if the board would ever incorporate video lottery machines, he says the board wants to leave that up to state lawmakers.
We do not believe that a 7-member appointed board should unilaterally make that type of a decision. That if it is something that the governor and the lieutenant governor and the leadership, the legislature feels something that they would like for us to take a look at, then obviously we would. It is a concept that is utilized in various states.
An even busier day tomorrow, Scott, with the annual Eggs and Issues breakfast at the World Congress Center, and then the governor's State of the State address tomorrow night. Reporting live, I'm Sandra Parrish at the state capitol.
Thanks very much, Sandra. Unusual to get so much done on the very first day. And as Sandra mentioned, Governor Deal is delivering his State of the State address in prime time tomorrow night. Sandra sat down with the governor last week to get a sneak peek of some of the things he'll be talking about. Among them, changes he's proposing to Georgia's pre-K program.
Pre-K was part of the HOPE package last year that we had to make some adjustments on. We anticipate, if the recommendations we've submitted are approved, that we can add 10 days to the pre-K program, bring it back up to a 170-day school year for our pre-K students. That will give our pre-K teachers a raise as a result of that, and we think that's certainly what we can do and what we should do.
And is that money coming from HOPE?
Yes. That is the exclusive funding source for our pre-K program.
Governor Deal is also proposing some cost-cutting measures, including consolidating parts of state government. And
last year, we had to take some rather drastic action because we were in such serious budget crisis. And we've basically eliminated some 14,000 authorized slots in state government. This year, what we have done, since I've had the opportunity of a year of looking at the operations of state government and the executive agencies, is to try to find out, are there ways that we can do these things better, more efficiently, and more cost effectively? And some of that rearrangement, in fact, all of that rearrangement has in mind saving taxpayers money, while at the same time improving the services that we're providing. And that will involve some shifting of some functions. We believe we can eliminate what is called SPA and consolidate it into another state agency that does similar things, and we think we can save money in the process of doing things like that.
Governor Nathan Deal. And now we take a moment to honor two legislators who have passed away since the last session. Senator Robert Brown was from Macon and held a seat in the state Senate for 20 years. Representative Bobby Franklin represented Marietta in the House of Representatives for about 14 years. In tribute, here are some clips from last session and what they had to say.
After 20 years of having this on the books, somebody somewhere has an interest that they want to protect. And I think that when we have this kind of thing, that we need to be very cautious, because we have not heard any outcry from citizens or local people to say that this is something that we need to address.
Make no mistake, we understand that this process is very partisan, but there's a way to do it without just being egregiously partisan. We think it's important for Georgia to get its act together and get more involved in mass transit, the Macon to Atlanta rail line, as well as the Chattanooga to Atlanta rail line.
Back in January, we had an opportunity with one simple vote to enact zero-based budgeting. We missed that, and here we are at sine die, and the governor still does not have a bill from this year dealing with zero-based budgeting, because we've been playing around with the Senate and whether or not they should have their own budget office. While that might save the taxpayers some money, please, let's don't mess with a chance to have zero-based budgeting.
Bobby Franklin and Robert Brown in memoriam this evening. We kick off our series of leadership interviews on Prime Time Lawmakers with one of the people at the top of any legislative agenda, the Speaker of the House. Sandra Parrish got an exclusive interview with Speaker Ralston, David Ralston, on his priorities for the upcoming session.
Well, obviously, I think the primary goal every year is to pass a fiscally responsible, balanced budget. That's been a challenge, as we all know, in this economic climate that we've been in now for the past 3 or 4 years. I'm very proud of the way we've handled that process, though. You know, we have cut over 20% out of the state budget in order to balance it over the last 3 fiscal years. And we've done it without raising taxes. I think that's important. I think that the last thing we need to do when unemployment has hovered up close to 10% and sometimes over 10% here in the state is to ask Georgians to send state government more of their money. But we're going to go through that budget process as we do every year. We're going to go through it in a very responsible way, and that'll be the most important thing that we do. There are a number of other issues I think they'll get a lot of discussion and consideration. I'm really looking forward to debating the idea of criminal justice reform. I think you'll hear some more discussion about tax reform, because I think tax reform is a way to make us more competitive as a state in terms of creating jobs, and I think that is the most important goal that we can have as a state government, is to create a climate through our tax code and through lessening the regulatory burden on small businesses so that Georgia becomes a very job-friendly state.
Have y'all worked out the problems that we were seeing when that legislation came up?
The problem that you saw last session was not a problem with the merit of the idea or the plan. The problem was that in the final hours of the session, I became concerned that the credibility of the numbers and the credibility of the data that we were operating from was not what I wanted it to be. I didn't have a great comfort level that we could trust those numbers. I didn't feel like I could ask the members of the House of Representatives to vote on something that could, however they voted, that could come back in 6 months or a year down the road and not be what they voted for. I think the goal was sound. It's still sound. The whole idea behind tax reform was to create a tax policy in Georgia that would make us competitive with other states that we compete with for business and for jobs coming into the state. That was my only mission. It's still my only mission, and I remain committed to seeing if we can't put together a tax reform plan that will be pro-small business and pro-job, because I think that's what Georgians really look to us to do, is not create government jobs, but simply to allow a climate to be created here in this state that is conducive to small businesses here maintaining employees or adding employees, and then attracting new business to come into the state and locate here.
You're still looking at reducing the personal income tax rate?
You know, there's a number of different ideas out there, and I think that certainly is a goal that whether it's this session or maybe a session down the road a bit, that I hope we can move in that direction. That's a good direction to move in. You know, tax reform is a very fundamental change, and sometimes fundamental change takes a little bit of time. And so I'm patient. I think the goal is to produce a sound plan that moves us in the direction of being more competitive and being more conducive to job creation here in the state.
So it doesn't sound like you actually have a plan ready right now to submit.
Well, we're very, very close. I don't want to get into the details of it quite yet. You know, a lot of people are involved in the process that have great ideas. We're listening to all the ideas, as we have been now in the run-up to the session, and I anticipate that we'll have a plan that will be made public very soon.
Now, not unlike the special counsel that looked at tax reform last year, we've had another special counsel over this past year since the session that was looking at reforming the state's judicial system. What are your thoughts so far on some of the recommendations that have come out of that council?
I think it's a very good beginning. You know, we got a wake-up call here last year when the budget for the State Department of Corrections went over $1 billion per year. We're incarcerating a lot of people in Georgia. I'm a great believer in incarcerating and throwing the key away from many of those offenders that are of violent crimes or those that would prey upon young children or the elderly or traffic in drugs. And this is not about those kind of offenses. This is about offenders whose primary problem is a drug or alcohol addiction or a dependency issue or possession crime. It's about asking if we can't give those sorts of offenders a second chance. I think the people of Georgia are ready for a new way where instead of asking them to send money to incarcerate those people, that we put those resources into rehabilitation, into alternatives such as the drug court programs, so that we can turn those individuals into working individuals, taxpayers, individuals who take care of their families. I think Georgia will be a better state if we can do that, and I think we can.
All right. Well, Speaker Ralston, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being with us on Prime Time Lawmakers.
After the short break, we're going to be back and we're going to talk with Tom Crawford of the Georgia Report. We're going to look at what we might expect in the early days of the legislative session. What do you think about tax reform, shorter sentences? How does the idea of legalizing gambling on horse racing grab you? It could all come up. We'll talk about that and more in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to Prime Time Lawmakers. Joining me now to talk about the start of the 2012 session is Tom Crawford. He's editor of the Georgia Report. Tom, you've been covering Georgia politics for more than 20 years. It's pretty much business as usual from your perspective here as we get things started here under the Gold Dome, or are they off to a faster start than everyone expected?
They've been a little busier the first day than they typically are, Scott, and we already talked about that some at the beginning of the session where they're actually passing bills and sending them to the governor for a signature. So that's a little unusual, but on the other hand, they were ready to go, so why not?
Yeah, so why not? And the very first thing they did today, I saw Senator Thompson from Cobb County complaining about moving too quickly on this whole issue on how teachers can be disciplined. And that's going to the governor now, right?
Yes, it is. It's going to him. He will probably sign it, and I know Senator Thompson was a little perturbed that they were putting that on the table right there on the first day instead of sticking to the ceremonial activities and maybe putting it to a committee or something. But you know, they were ready to go, so they figured, why waste any more time?
Well, an awful lot of taxpayers sort of like that attitude.
Well, I think they do.
Move it along.
Sure.
Before we get through, we're going to talk about just what sort of motivation lawmakers do have to move things along, but we'll save that. That's a little tease. We'll save that for the end of our broadcast tonight. Next order of business is the state of the state, and the governor will give the chamber and some lawmakers a preview tomorrow at Eggs and Issues, and then a primetime speech that we'll carry here in GPB tomorrow evening. He's already transmitted a couple of things he has in mind. Are you hearing about any bombshells that might be inside this message?
I don't think there will be any bombshells per se. He's going to talk about, as you mentioned, merging or consolidating or eliminating a few small state agencies. He's got some ideas on how to make the state more competitive and bring in business. I'm sure he'll talk some more about his justice, his criminal sentencing reform too, but I don't think there will be anything in there that will be a huge surprise to people.
And of course, embedded in that message, some of his predecessors have separated the state of the state from the budget message. Will Governor Deal do them both at the same time?
I think he'll talk more about the budget later this week, but he could well hint at that some, or at least get into that subject some while he talks about the other issues as well.
Now, what do you think about him telegraphing early on that he's going to very likely do away with some state jobs, more efficiency in state government, consolidating some departments, privatizing others, including the aviation division?
Correct.
He wants to spin that off completely.
Well, now that's, to be fair, part of the aviation department was returned to the public safety department. So the Georgia Public Safety Department, Department of Natural Resources, they still have control of their aircraft. The others, he just wants to privatize. He feels that's a more efficient way to do things. So there's, I think you can justify that, certainly. A lot of the state agencies he wants to eliminate or consolidate are smaller agencies, so you'll save some money on the margins there, but it won't be huge cost savings because, you know, state government's a big animal, and there's no way you can really take it all down at once.
And we're not talking about hundreds of jobs on the block here, are we?
Probably a few dozen, I would guess. So, yeah, it's not like we're looking at mass layoffs or anything like that, although if you're the one whose position might be endangered, I guess you might be a little nervous about it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, perhaps they'll be able to find a way for attrition and that sort of thing,
Sure.
like they normally do in these situations. Now, as far as the numbers themselves are concerned, are we seeing a little bit of sigh of relief at the state capitol that revenue's beginning to pick up? And it has for several months.
Yeah, for more than a year now, we've seen what they call year-over-year increases in the revenue numbers, and that's good, especially after such a deep recession that we were in. I think if the other shoe could drop and we could start seeing more of an improvement in the unemployment numbers, people would really start to feel a sigh of relief. But certainly, it's good news to see the numbers improve, even if it's only by a little bit each month.
We're talking to Tom Crawford of the Georgia Report here about some things that could happen in the very early days of this General Assembly. And in fact, later on, one of the big issues, one of the big elephants in the room is tax reform. And you had a column out during the holidays I really enjoyed. Walk us through why it's fairly likely we're not going to see major tax reform anytime soon, or at least maybe this year.
Well, you referred to part of it, Scott, when you were reading those poll numbers earlier. If you want to make a significant cut in the state income tax, which I think is Governor Deal's objective and Speaker Ralston's too, you almost have to raise the state sales tax in some form, whether you make it from a 4% to a 5% tax overall, or whether you put the sales tax back on groceries. I don't think that's the kind of thing that they would vote to do this session when they've got to go out this fall and campaign for re-election. You know, they're running for 2-year terms again. And because of redistricting, they're going to be running in areas where there are going to be a lot of new constituents they've never met before. They're going to have to explain themselves to these new voters. And it's really difficult to explain to them, well, yeah, I voted to raise the sales tax on groceries, but I had a good reason for doing it. Let me tell you why. So I think the best shot at reforming or revising the tax code this year will be probably to eliminate the energy tax that businesses and farmers pay. I think there's a pretty good chance that will happen. As far as a major revision where you raise the sales tax on this hand to cut the income tax on that hand, I think Speaker Ralston himself said that might be something we need to look at a year or two down the road.
Will they pick on cigarette smokers?
Well, Governor Deal has already said he won't sign that tax increase. He has, his media spokesman said very flatly, no, we won't do it. Although, again, as the poll number suggested, some people, 60% said they would be in favor of doing that if that was a way to decrease the income tax. But Governor Deal, I think, has pretty much ruled that out.
What are you hearing could happen in judicial reform? Are we actually going to see some shorter sentences for petty criminals to help relieve the burden on the taxpayer and locking all these people up?
I think we're going to see that for sure, because for several years now, the budget for corrections has been $1 billion or more. And as much as we all like to get tough on crime, I think Governor Deal recognized that's just a burden we can't bear any longer. I mean, it's great to do when the money's rolling in and you've got the budget to handle it. But when the state budget and state revenues have been going down during this recession like they have, you just can't afford to do it anymore. And I think that's the reason why it will pass.
And finally, personhood. Do you think that'll come up, the abortion fight?
There will be an attempt to bring it up. I think, again, the Speaker Ralston may decide that discretion is the better part of valor, and let's not try to tackle that this session.
Tom, great to see you. We'll read you online at gareport.com.
Thank you, Scott.
Tom Crawford with us this evening, my guest tonight. And he's the editor of the Georgia Report. He will be back with us tomorrow night for our special live broadcast of the State of the State address. We appreciate you watching this evening. Coming up tomorrow on Prime Time Lawmakers, Governor Nathan Deal will deliver his annual State of the State address to a joint session of the General Assembly. We'll bring you the entire address live at 7 p.m., plus reaction and analysis. That's all in a special 1-hour edition of Prime Time Lawmakers on GPB TV and GPB Radio statewide. If you missed any part of this broadcast, you can catch Prime Time Lawmakers and repeats at 5:30 tomorrow morning. Coming up next to GPB Georgia Traveler. Join David, Ricky, and special contributor Chef Marvin Woods as they explore the Tellus Science Museum, visit historic Augusta, and discover fine Southern cuisine at the Empire State South Restaurant. That and much more on Georgia Traveler next. And that's our broadcast for this first legislative day of the 2012 session. I'm Scott Slade. Join us for a special 1-hour State of the State edition of Primetime Lawmakers tomorrow night. Have a great night.
This is a GPB original production.